So once upon a time, in the early 90s, an electronics company known primarily for selling Walkmans by the name of Sony was poised to enter into a partnership agreement with rising gaming superstar Nintendo. This unlikeliest of union folks was supposed to bear fruit in the form of a new console, a sibling, and a successor, and an add-on of sorts to the SNES that would go on to be dubbed the Nintendo PlayStation. This little Frankensteinian creation would have been Sony's first console baby, as well as the company's first foray into the very young but rapidly growing video game industry. But, as fate would have it, premarital disputes, aka licensing disagreements with the big N, would put the kibosh on all the best laid plans, and, well, this shotgun wedding would ultimately end up falling apart at the chapel, with Nintendo running off to bet another partner by the name of Philips.
I'll handle the rubies.
Leaving Sony clutching its pearls at the altar of the Consumer Electronics Show on that fateful day in June of 1991. Fast forward to 2021. The PS5 proudly sits in my living room demanding the lion's share of available real estate on my friggin' credenza, as if commanding to be admired, to be respected. The dual LEDs on its pointed supervillain flaps emit a soft, inviting glow as the sleek Dualsense in my hands, Sony's first significant redesign of the DualShock since, well, the DualShock, conducts a symphony of tactile sensations for my nerve endings as I run, jump, and make little bastards explode into showers of glittering gold coins while guiding a plump, cute little robot character across a jungle-themed level, all the while tapping my foot to the rhythm of this ridiculously techno, catchy world theme pouring out of my headphones. I can't help but be reminded of a certain overall plumber, and by extension, of the brief affair between the two now world-renowned gaming giants all those many years ago. Over a quarter of a century later, folks, an Asobi team, Astro's developers, are tapping deep into that nostalgia well with a PS5 launch title that is simultaneously a throwback to days gone by, while also being a showcase for what the future has in store. And if Astro's Playroom is perhaps a knowing wink wink to early inspirations that birthed the iconic brand, then the DualSense is a Sony love letter to the House of Mario's penchant for designing unconventional systems and peripherals that place fun and immersion and wackiness squarely at the heart of the gameplay experience. Make no mistake though, Astro's Playroom, while evoking that certain je ne sais quoi that's been a key ingredient in Nintendo's secret sauce for decades, is still unquestionably, unabashedly a celebration of all things PlayStation. Every square inch and pixel in this brief but exuberantly charming little platformer is drenched and dripping in PlayStation nostalgia, with Easter eggs and homages galore to every major and not so major and obscured and weird PlayStation franchise that's been part of the family throughout the generations. Every obscure peripheral, every character, every boot-up sound that's been burned into my gaming lizard brain, it's all here, and it all had me grinning from ear to ear to ear, and might have even gotten me a little misty-eyed during my playthrough, if I'm being honest. I mean, I nearly jumped out of my freaking chair when I spotted this little Azrael bot over here pretending to be all menacing and whatnot. Soul Reaver, anyone? Blue Point? I'm looking at you guys. Let's make it happen. It's been a while. Let's go. Anyways, tucked away in each of the worlds that make up the bulk of Astro's playtime are hidden artifacts and puzzle pieces for you to discover. The artifacts are these immaculately rendered 3D models of consoles and peripherals from throughout PlayStation's storied history that you can ogle and interact with to your heart's content. And the puzzle pieces are part of this larger wall mural that gets filled in at the Labo area. A sort of virtual PlayStation museum, if you will, as you find them. And I won't show that here because watching said virtual PlayStation museum fill up with PlayStation memorabilia is a pure delight, and you should absolutely experience it for yourself if you're a nut like I am. You know, not every artifact or puzzle piece is found within the levels themselves though, but are instead won by spending the golden PlayStation coins you collect throughout the levels in this entertaining little gacha machine that's way more fun to use than it has any right to be, thanks to the DualSense's haptic feedback and adaptive triggers. So yes, let's talk about the DualSense because it's definitely one half of the fun equation that makes Astro's Playroom such a treat. I mean, listen, Asobi team is ridiculously talented. Astrobot Rescue Mission is considered, by those lucky enough to have played it, to not only be one of the best VR games of this last generation, up there with the likes of, I don't know, Half-Life Alyx. Oh yeah, I said that. You can fight me. But it's an amazing platformer in its own right. So I have no doubt that Asobi team could make an incredible game sans the gimmicks if they wanted to. But they really know how to implement the Dualsense's much-typed haptics to provide a level of tactile immersion and connection to the game world that I honestly wouldn't have thought all that necessary until after having experienced it. So, kudos to Sony for tapping into one of their exceptional in-house studios to create such a unique, charming, and exciting experience. Honestly, they could have just made a no-frills tutorial where it's just like a 3D rendering of the Dualsense. You hold it and you get a feel for the different vibration patterns and the trigger resistances. But that approach would have felt utterly lifeless and not been anywhere near as resoundingly brilliant or as convincing as playing through any one of the levels in Astro's Playroom. But it's just Rumble. I mean, how good could it be, right? I mean, we've had Rumble in our games dating all the way back to the long-forgotten era of the 90s with the N64 Rumble Pack. You see, all roads eventually lead back to Nintendo. Anyway, I was just as incredulous about the revelatory experiences people claimed they were having with this thing pre-release. But having now spent the past couple of months fondling, groping, manhandling the DualSense, hey, listen, what I do behind closed doors is my business, okay? Don't judge. I can unequivocally declare that Rumble has indeed entered the next-gen era with this controller. The much-used analogy of the hammer and the scalpel is truly apt in attempting to describe the difference between the traditional Rumble feedback we've lived with until now and the haptic feedback of the DualSense. Hell, I'd go further and say it's not even the hammer and scalpel anecdote that applies here. It's more like the scalpel and the scalpel and that little tiny robot arms thing that I'm sure you've seen. With the surgeon stitching a grate back together, that little surgical robot thing? Yeah, that thing. The difference is pretty wild. I mean, in this section here, you can absolutely feel the differences between the asphalt-like pavement, the craggy terrain, mucky slop, and slick ice as you roll around in one of the 4 suits, slash vehicles that our adorable little chibi robo-buddy can pilot. The method by which you zip the little guy into these suits is incredibly satisfying, by the way. As you swipe up on the trackpad, you can feel the individual teeth on the zipper, snap into place with one another. It's like crazy satisfying, like popping bubble wrap levels of satisfying. How they translated and differentiated subtle tactile differences between walking on wood and metal to this like a slightly bendy plastic into Rumble is beyond me, and I'm content to say that it's black magic. Okay, what they pulled off with the adaptive triggers, by the way, is just stupefying. With the way the trigger resistance increases when you're drawing a bowstring back to pop this little guy's balloon and send them screaming into the trash heap below, or the way they rapidly skip under your finger to simulate kickback, like in this section right here where you go all friggin' Tony Montana on these guys. I mean, it truly does help bring you, as a player, closer to the world of the game in a way that, just like VR, has to be experienced firsthand. It's subtle, but it's effective. Now, time will tell if haptic feedback will become the expected standard for most gaming experiences moving forward. If we'll just become accustomed to it to the point of not caring, or even if most people will love it enough for it to matter in the first place. I mean, gamers, we can be a jaded bunch and hard to impress at the best of times, but I mean, this thing might just end up becoming a forgotten novelty. But as of now, I honestly can't imagine going back to regular old boring low-def Rumble after feeling the explosive thrusts on the engines of Astro's rocket ship while navigating my way around these assholes, or the springiness of Frogger here. Honestly, kudos again to Sony and the Asobi team for borrowing a little pixie dust from an old ex and thinking outside the proverbial box in terms of what they wanted to offer players when it came to immersion going into this 9th gen cycle? I think it's 9th gen. Beyond ray tracing or reduced load times, I mean, these features are indeed extremely welcome, especially for us console warriors who have staunchly defended our underpowered systems to the PC master race for too long, knowing well that our beloved gaming boxes couldn't hold a candle to the beefier gaming rigs out there. I mean, Sony could have just brute forced it and simply made a bigger, badder PlayStation, which they did, to be fair, but they also worked a little magic back into the experience with the Dualsense that might not sound all that impressive or revolutionary on paper, but I think they understand that immersing players into these digital worlds is a multi-part equation that doesn't just have to stop with higher fidelity visuals, smoother frame rates, or snappier load times. All of those improvements are already, par for the course as technology improves. And as we start to see diminishing returns on the visual end of things, our other senses become just as important, I think. And I think they know that. So, before I keep ranting on unnecessarily long, in closing, Astro's Playroom is a joyous and wonderfully inventive little platformer from a crazy talented development studio that welcomes you to celebrate PlayStation's history, from its tumultuous and unlikely beginnings through its meteoric rise into the annals of the pulp culture zeitgeist, and onwards onto its future, whatever that may be. It's a nostalgic jaunt down memory lane that, for gamers of a certain age, like myself, who still recall moments like checking the back of the case to get that one codec frequency or leaving the console on because you didn't have a memory card, will immediately appreciate and perhaps even get a little emotional over. While younger gamers get an interactive and exceedingly fun PlayStation History 101, all wrapped up in a shiny next-gen package. So, if you were lucky enough to get a hold of Sony's latest behemoth on launch, or plan on picking one up down the line when the scalpers are, done scalping, gotta hate those scalpers. Please don't buy ridiculously overpriced console from scalpers. Anyways, listen, it goes without saying that Astro's Playroom should be at the top of your must-play list when you finally get your PlayStation 5. Not only is it a ridiculously fun and polished platformer that also happens to be a showpiece for what that crazy DualSense can do, it's a jubilant celebration of PlayStation's legacy and all the great gaming memories made throughout the years. So, as that Sony slogan goes, folks, this one is indeed for the players.
PlayStation